Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. In today's episode, we're going to evaluate Taijuan Walker's 2023 season. It was an interesting one. The win totals look good. The numbers outside of that, iffy. And he wasn't used in the postseason at all. And clearly not happy about that. So what's his role going forward? We're going to break down everything that has to do with the Phillies' newest starter on today's episode. Let's get started.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm Connor Thomas, your host. Thank you so much for checking us out. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff that helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. Really appreciate it. Subscribing will let you know when new episodes are posted. You'll get notifications on that. And it takes 2 seconds. It costs you no money. It's easy as anything to do. It's a really huge help here to me on Locked On Phillies. So I appreciate everyone who's already done that and anyone who's going to, thanks to this video. So thank you for checking us out. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started winning your $150 in bonus bets. Now, I've been going through evaluations of players from the 2023 Philadelphia Phillies. And let me know in the comments of this episode who you want me to evaluate next. We've gone through a bunch of guys. Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler. We're doing Taijuan Walker today. We did Matt Strom. We did, trying to think of the position players, Bohm, Stott, Marsh, Schwarber, Castellanos, Harper. We've done a lot of guys already. So go ahead and run through the list of episodes, and you'll be able to see all the evaluations. So I put them all on a playlist for you. But let me know in the comments of this episode who you want me to evaluate next. We haven't really gotten through a lot of bullpen guys. We've only gotten through a couple of the guys who have made starts for this team. So still plenty of names to run through when it comes to evaluating their 2023 season. But let's jump into Taijuan Walker today. Now, Walker was signed this past offseason to be a member of the Philadelphia Phillies. And he was signed to a multi-year deal. 4 years, $72 million was the signing mark for Taijuan Walker. And he came from a division rival in the New York Mets. We had seen him in New York for a couple of years. So you're like, okay, we had an idea of what Taijuan Walker was. Devastating splitter, solid stuff. Not a top end of the rotation guy, but a guy that can be a big-bodied, powerful reliever or starter for you, depending on how you want to employ him. Now, he's been mostly a starter in his career, but there have been times where he's been employed in relief a little bit as well. Not as much, and the Phillies didn't use him like that this year. I'm just saying, like, he was a guy coming in that you were expecting to be a back-end starter, or perhaps if something went wrong with him or right with guys like Andrew Painter or Christopher Sanchez, he could have been moved to the pen. But what ended up happening is a lot of guys were unavailable at the start of the year, and Taijuan Walker had to carry this team. Now, he's 31 years of age, so he's up there a little bit, but the size, he's 6'4", 235. Like, this guy is a monster. He could play, like, defensive end in the NFL. And you probably have to put on a little bit of weight, but you get my point. He's a very big guy, so his large frame handles a lot of innings well. And the amount of innings thrown this year, I mean, we'll show you that. 172 and 2/3 innings. That is the highest mark of any season of his career. So a new career high in innings. That's a good start for evaluating his season by the numbers. ERA, a 4.38, which it's not terrible. Last year in New York, he had a 3.49. This year, a 4.38. But in 2021, a season where he was an all-star, his only all-star season, which was with the New York Mets, had a 4.47 ERA total. So 4.38 isn't bad. You'll take that for a middle to back end starter. So that's all fine. He wasn't a heavy home run guy. I mean, he gave up 20 home runs in 172 and 2/3 innings. You'd like to see him get that down a little bit, but that wasn't too much of an issue. He had 138 strikeouts. That's a little low, but he's not really, unless the splitter's going, he doesn't really have great strikeout stuff outside of that. The big thing is he just worked out of trouble a lot this year. And the very interesting thing about evaluating Taijuan Walker is the record. He won 15 games this year. He was 15-6. It was kind of, now, I don't want to say it was like a Fugazi 15-win season because some of the numbers showed that he was pretty darn good at like a 7.2 strikeout per 9. Now, 194 strikeout to walk ratio, that needs to get better. Like he needs to strike out a lot more than he walks. But he was minimizing hits. His whip was 1.3, which not awful. I mean, he was what you expect. Taijuan Walker was the definition of a fourth or fifth starter for the Philadelphia Phillies by the numbers. Like everything he did this year was saying, okay, this guy can be a back end of the rotation piece for a solid team. The only thing that's different is the fact that he won 15 games and went 15-6. And it's like, how did he do that? I think he was just, I hate to say it this way, because I don't think he had a bad year. He was really rough down the stretch, and it's why he didn't throw in the postseason. That's what we're going to get into a little bit coming up in the second segment. But like, it's not like he stunk in 2023, but I do think he was lucky to end up with 15 wins. I think he just got a lot of good run support. I think he was in a position to throw deep into games, and the Phillies offense might get going a little bit later, especially early on in the year. It took that team a while to figure out how to score runs. So the longer you go into the games, the better chance you're going to find to steal a win. That's the thing. He just ate up innings early on in the season, and he threw in spots that, for whatever reason, seemed to result in wins. Again, you don't win 15 games by having a bad season. You don't. That's impossible. Nobody's ever had a bad 15-win season. But you can have a 15-win season that's not the caliber of some other ones. And I don't think that this was the quality of that. I really do think the 15 wins was just him happening to pitch on right days and against right opponents. Just kind of how the schedule fell. He was a little bit lucky with the final win total. The numbers show you he's a fourth or fifth starter. And that's fine, right? When you look at what the Philadelphia Phillies have, you could do worse for a fourth or fifth starter than Taijuan Walker. And when you have Wheeler at the top, Nola at the 2, Suarez available, Sanchez still potentially in the starting rotation at some point, and maybe you're going out and getting another starting pitcher this offseason, in addition to re-signing Aaron Nola, which the Phillies already did, well, that would push him to 5 in the rotation. And you're like, okay, that's a really good 5. Think about it. In past years, the fifth starter in the rotation has been, Vince Velasquez? He might have even been higher than that. Spencer Howard, who can't even stay in the major leagues. Like, you've had guys that are unusable in the fifth starter spot. Taijuan Walker was an all-star 2 seasons prior to this one. He didn't have his best year, but the numbers in some spots are good. And as long as he can eat innings, he just had a career high in innings this past year, he's going to get the job done in the fifth starter spot. And every once in a while, he'll go out and give you a gem. He was a guy that battled, right? He'd give up 3 runs early, and then you'd blink, and the next thing you know, it's the 7th inning, and the Phillies are up 4-3, and Walker is settled in big time. So where Aaron Nola struggles like the second or third time through the lineup, Taijuan Walker seemed to struggle through the first. And then after he got through the first time through the lineup, he figured out hitters and seemed to really, really battle there. And that's what I think helped him get some of the wins too. It was just the way he fought through wins. He was, I think, the grittiest pitcher for the Philadelphia Phillies in 2023. And that he had so many outings that could have just turned into blow up, terrible, awful outings. You give up 6, you give up 7, your team gets smoked, you let your team down. And he stopped the bleeding early and battled to have a good amount of innings eaten up in those types of spots. So he deserves full credit for that. And I think he was a nice addition to the team this year. Do I expect more out of him in 2024? Well, maybe if the top end of the rotation looks stronger, then yes, I can expect more out of him. Maybe if he gets pushed back to the 5th spot in the rotation instead of he was like flirting with the 4 or even the 3 at points when Ranger Suarez was not available. I think that could help him being in a little bit less of a responsible spot. But I don't think Taijuan Walker had a bad year. I think he had a bad stretch to end the year, and a couple other contributing factors led to him, well, what we're going to talk about next, not getting postseason action. He didn't pitch in the playoffs at all. Why in the world would you not throw a guy that had 15 wins in the regular season? Well, I'm going to try and crack that code coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. First, though, I want to tell you about my friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. All right, the NFL season's in full swing. Everything's rolling. The Birds just had a really big win over Kansas City. There's no better time to get in with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. It doesn't matter. So here's the trick. Here's what you do, right? Or at least what I would do. I would go on to FanDuel. I would look through all the games they have, check the money lines on everything, basketball, football, hockey, whatever you can find. And maybe you find somebody who's like a team that's minus, I don't know, something crazy, 500. Think about college football. Think about like if Bama was playing Northern Illinois Tech or some random terrible school. It'd probably be like minus 600 on the money line. Bet them. Bet your $5 bet on them. And all you need is your team to win. And you'll get $150 in bonus bets with that winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app's super easy to use. Like I was saying, there's a wide range of betting options, different sports, different types of bets with spreads, player props, parlays, over-unders, all that good stuff. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Keep the NFL season going strong and make some money doing it. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Okay, so why did Taijuan Walker not pitch in the postseason? Well, let's go back to his baseball reference page here, and it gives you his last 5 games. So in his final 5 games of the 2023 season, let's go in reverse order. So last start of the year, then second to last start and all that. Listen to these amount of earned runs. His last start of the year, he allowed 4. His second to last start, he allowed 2. Not bad. His third to last start, he allowed 5. His fourth to last start, he allowed 6 runs, 5 earned. His fifth to last start, he allowed 4 runs, 4 earned. Like he was just giving up. In his final 5 starts of the year, he allowed, let me do some quick math, 10, 18. He allowed 20 runs in his last 5 starts. That's not good. And going into the postseason, you have to go with the hot hand. Aaron Nola got lucky that he got hot hand at the end of the regular season to earn the trust back. Now, I still think he would have thrown in the postseason, but I think him having a couple good starts down near the end of the season really, really helped him earn the trust of Rob Thomson and this organization, and he showed that he deserved it with the way he pitched in the postseason. Taijuan Walker did the opposite. He went out down the stretch when the Phillies could have really used him to help them lock up a spot sooner rather than later, and he was not good. And you had a bunch of options. You had Christopher Sanchez, you had Michael Lorenzen, you had Zach Wheeler, you had Ranger Suarez, you had Aaron Nola. There were a lot of guys who could have made playoff starts for this team, or at least that made starts in the regular season that you were evaluating. And what ended up happening is Taijuan Walker just found himself on the outside looking in. Here's where I would be upset if I was Taijuan Walker. And if you didn't see him, Taijuan Walker was liking tweets about people saying he should have pitched in the postseason and everything like that, and tweets about the Phillies making a bad decision to not use him. Here's where I understand that. Like, you can't be liking tweets about the organization or the manager or stuff like that, especially when you're on a multi-year deal. It's not a good sign for the locker room. But where I get it, and Dave Dombrowski and Rob Thomson, by the way, have already said they have no problem with Taijuan Walker. Everything's all good. So I wouldn't worry about that being like a consistent issue going forward. I'm just saying you can't do that. But in game 4, right? Yeah, game 4 of the NLCS. Was it? You had the bullpen game because it was Wheeler, Nola, Suarez bullpen game out in Arizona, and you went with Christopher Sanchez. And I'm not mad at that. Like, I'm not saying Christopher Sanchez should not have made that start, but what you did as soon as Christopher Sanchez was done, he only threw like 2 innings, was you went to Jeff Hoffman in the 3rd inning, a high leverage reliever that you could have used later on in the game. I don't understand it at all. Why in the world would you not have Taijuan Walker ready to go in that spot? Like, that's one of my biggest gripes with the postseason. You have other starters back there. You have Michael Lorenzen, who threw a no-hitter for you this year. You have Taijuan Walker, who's won 15 games for you this year. And you only get 2 innings out of Christopher Sanchez, which doesn't mean you did the right thing or the wrong thing to start Sanchez. I'm not mad at that. I'm just saying you got to the 2nd inning. You have other long-term relievers. If you can get 3 or 4 out of Taijuan Walker, it turns into normal bullpen usage. But instead, you just go full bullpen game to match their bullpen game. If I was Taijuan Walker, I would have been upset with that. I would have been. I would have said, I won 15 games for you this year. I ate up innings. I battled through tough spots. I was an all-star 2 years ago, and you're not throwing me at all in the postseason? Like, not even when the situation seems to specifically call for it. Like, I get not throwing him in the wild card series, short series. I get not throwing him against the Braves. The Phillies made that a short series. And I understand some spots against the Diamondbacks not using him, but that made no sense to me. And that's where I think the issues come from that Taijuan Walker had with the way that he was handled this postseason. So, yeah, why no playoff action? Part of it is that he didn't have a great end to the season. I read you his numbers, 20 runs allowed in his final 5 starts of the 2023 regular season. But also, I think it was partially mismanagement on the part of Rob Thomson. And I think he needs to be better in the future of handling that. Now, I'm not saying Taijuan Walker has to throw if the Phillies make it to the postseason this next year. Like, you have to evaluate every year in a vacuum. I'm saying in that spot, in this season, with what Taijuan Walker had accomplished, he deserved the right to get the baseball. And he didn't. And I would be upset over that. All these guys are competitors. Like, you might look at a guy like, I'm going to take a ricochet shot at somebody. I'm going to pick somebody who's not on the team anymore. Bailey Falter, who got traded. You might look at a guy like Bailey Falter, who's like the back end of the rotation or a bullpen guy at times, and say, well, dude, you got to understand why you're not playing. But these guys are professional athletes. They get paid to play baseball, not watch baseball. And they want to be out there. Each and every one of them wants to be competing for their team in the biggest spot. And Taijuan Walker's a guy who's had that opportunity. And he hasn't had a big enough drop-off where it's like, oh, you're at the end of your career. You're not the same guy. We can't trust you in the postseason anymore. Just he got usurped by a couple pitchers who were pitching better and a couple pitchers who were just overall better pitchers. And that's a tough draw, but then you have to pick and choose your spots where you use him. And I think it was silly that he wasn't utilized in that spot in the series against Arizona in Game 4. Or was it Game 5? No, Game 4, because Wheeler won 5, Nola lost 6, and then you had Suarez and stuff. Yeah, I don't love it. I don't love that he wasn't used, and I don't love the handling of the bullpen at points by Rob Thomson. I've already made that clear when we talked about the season. But so if I was Taijuan Walker, I wouldn't be liking tweets like that. But in my mind, like my mental Twitter feed would be filled with, why in the world did you not pitch me in those spots? So I get it. I really do. And I don't think he's going to be a locker room problem. I think the culture is too strong for that here in Philadelphia. So I'm not worried about this carrying over to the next season. I get why he wasn't used. I also get why he was upset he wasn't used. And I don't know how much it would have changed for the Philadelphia Phillies, but I think in that one instance, he deserved a shot. He didn't get it, and he's upset. And I understand that. So overall, Taijuan Walker's 2023 season, was it a success? He did what you would expect him to do, right? He met expectations. He earned his paycheck, but I don't think he earned anything above his paycheck, if that makes sense. Like, he was as on par as you can get for a guy who you brought in to be like a 4th starter or a 5th starter. And if next year he moves into the role as the 5th starter, well, then you might be getting a steal for having that quality of player in that role. And not steal monetarily. I mean, 4 years, $72 million is not like a cheap contract, but still, you get what I'm saying. Like, you'd have a really good pitcher in that spot. So we'll see. But coming up, we're going to break down what I think his role could be for next year and the scenarios that affect that. But I think the 2023 Taijuan Walker, he had some good, he had some bad. It evens out to exactly the guy you thought you were getting. A back-end rotation guy that goes out there and battles for you and eats up those tough, gritty innings, and I think he did that. Yep, again, coming up next, we're going to look at his role for 2024. What could happen to Taijuan Walker going into this next season? How does he fit into the Phillies' long-term plans? We'll discuss that coming up as we wrap up Locked On Phillies. Okay, so let's look at the framework of the rotation in 2024. Dave Dombrowski left us some breadcrumbs in his end-of-year media availability. He said that Mick Abel isn't there yet. Griff McGarry isn't there yet. Andrew Painter is completely out of the question for 2024 as he recovers from Tommy John surgery. So that leaves the guys that are on the Major League roster. Doesn't seem like anyone's coming up from the minors, at least for the start of the season. Zach Wheeler's your 1, no doubt. Aaron Nola is your 2, no doubt. I think Ranger Suarez has locked himself into the 3 spot in the rotation. So that leaves 2 spots, the 4th starter role, the 5th starter role. And the Phillies have said multiple times, 6-man rotations they think help prepare you for the postseason, keep your guys fresh. So maybe there's 6 spots in the rotation if they go out and sign another top star. I have to imagine Christopher Sanchez will be in the rotation from Jump Street this year. It's hard not to imagine that with the year he put together. He was very, very good. So Taijuan Walker and Christopher Sanchez are kind of battling for that 4th spot in the rotation. One of them's going to be 4th. One of them's going to be 5th. If I was the Philadelphia Phillies, well, that's not true. I'm just going to say about the evaluation. Like, who do I think is the more talented pitcher? I think Sanchez is more talented, or at least has a higher ceiling. I think that Taijuan Walker is the more proven pitcher. So what do you value more? The rookie who can have a high ceiling or the proven veteran talent? We talked about this with Johan Rojas playing in the postseason. And clearly the Phillies chose to play Johan Rojas. Now, whether you feel that worked out or not, based on his lack of hitting, but stellar defense, this team showed their hand when it comes to these decisions, and they went young and talented with a high ceiling. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Christopher Sanchez be the 4th starter in this rotation and Taijuan Walker be the 5th. But where this gets interesting is if the Phillies do indeed go out and sign another starting pitcher in the free agency market, in addition to re-signing Aaron Nola. That still could be a thing. Yoshinobu Yamamoto's posting window is open. Maybe the Phillies are interested in him. Well, I know they're interested in him, but like maybe he's interested in here. Maybe there's another guy out there. Maybe there's a trade coming. I don't know what you're looking at doing. Maybe Taijuan Walker could be a trade candidate for another starting pitcher as like part of a deal. I don't know how that would work out. But if there's another starting pitcher coming in here, Walker could end up being that guy who goes to 6th man in the rotation, helps spell the rotation, and is a depth piece. He'd be a very overpaid 6th man in a rotation. But the fact of the matter is the Phillies have a lot of really good starting pitchers. And that's why they're so successful as an organization the past couple of years. And they should continue to do that. And unfortunately for Taijuan Walker, his role is not going to be relative to his paycheck or probably his skill level. But that's part of being on a great team. Do you think, I don't know, let's look at, do you think Nick Castellanos wants to hit 7th or 8th? Do you think JT Realmuto wants to hit 6th or 7th? Do you think Bohm and Stott should be low down in the lineup like they have been at points in the 2023 season? On other teams, they could all be top 4 hitters on a team. But they're not on this team, and they accept that role because they understand that means there's great players around them. Taijuan Walker could be in a lesser role in 2024, but it's only because the Philadelphia Phillies have insanely talented pitchers. I'm not down on Taijuan Walker at all. I'm realistic about the type of guy he is and the type of guy you brought him in here to be. You didn't sign him to be your ace. You signed him to be a depth rotation piece, and I think he handled that well in 2023. And I think even if he shifts a little bit back in the priority list in 2024, he'll handle his role like a professional, like a veteran, and he'll be able to eat up innings. And, hey, if he gets 15 wins again next year, what a damn run it would have been for Taijuan Walker. But that's my evaluation of his season. Let me know in the comments who you want me to evaluate next. Coming up tomorrow, it's going to be Thanksgiving. So we're going to have our annual Thanksgiving episode of what should we be thankful for right now as Philadelphia Phillies fans. I always like to stop and give thanks on the podcast episode that falls on Thanksgiving. So we'll discuss that tomorrow. And I will talk to you next time on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.